Hi, I'm Toni Williams, and this is Brooklyn Savvy.
Hi, I'm Toni Williams, and welcome to Brooklyn Savvy. As you know, this season I'm doing a deep dive into systemic racism and what it means to dismantle it and what it means to talk about these issues. So today we're going to be talking about COVID's impact on the arts and how it has also impacted BIPOC communities. So let me introduce who we have today. We have Donna Walker-Kuhn. Thank you, Donna, for joining us.
Thank you. My pleasure.
We have Dr. Toby Stein. We also have Christina Newman-Scott. So thank you, ladies, for joining. Thank you so much. Now, Donna, you are new to, well, you're not really new to Brooklyn Savvy. You were on Brooklyn Savvy many, many years ago, sitting in my house talking about another issue. So it's so good to have you come back and talk about what you do, because you have such a great reputation. Talk to us about the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you, Toni. I'm so happy to be here with these fabulous, savvy women. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am fourth generation post-slavery. I'm a daughter, sister, mother. When I was 5 years old, my mom took my twin sister and I to see the Bolshoi Ballet in Chicago. And growing up in a segregated African-American community, my world was very much focused on African-American culture. And then I began dancing and performed in an African dance company. Went to Howard University Law School. Then I moved to New York. And it wasn't until I got to New York that I realized that there were people other than Black people that I might want to look at and pay attention to. I was practicing law for a few years, and then I taught myself arts administration, volunteering at an arts organization, and started my work at the Dance Theater of Harlem. And that's when my career as an arts administrator really began. While touring with the Dance Theater of Harlem as Arthur Mitchell's assistant, we kept noticing that the audiences were not at all diverse, and they were predominantly white. And the company was about 98% African-American at that time. And Mr. Mitchell asked me to find out what was the problem. Why weren't the presenters having more diverse audiences? When I started to interview them, they said, we don't know how to do it. And that's when I created the National Audience Development Task Force. And that meant that I traveled to every city that we toured to 6 months in advance, galvanized leadership in the Black community, gave them specific directions on how to engage their community to welcome the company, and of course to sell tickets. And this resulted in a 45% increase in our sales, as well as us really being engaged with the African American community around the United States. And then I was at Dance Theater of Harlem for 9 years doing all kinds of wonderful things. And then I got a phone call from George C. Wolfe at the Public Theater. And George said, I've been here for 3 months and I noticed the audiences are predominantly white. I'd like this place to look like a subway stop. Can you do it? And so I said yes. And that I didn't really know what I was saying yes to, but the idea of working in a new genre, theater, the idea of working with the brilliant, brilliant George C. Wolfe was something I just knew my life was ready for. And so that began an audience development initiative at the Public Theater for all of the plays that we were producing, and then transferring to Broadway. So that's how I got to Broadway. My first play was Twilight Los Angeles with Anna Devere Smith. And then moving forward, all the plays that we did, I was responsible for engaging multicultural communities. But the pinnacle of my career at the Public Theater was the production of Bring in the Noise, Bring in the Funk. And for that production, Savion Glover, of course, choreography, and George directed, I was responsible for the workshop. Then I became the national coordinator of audience development for Bring in the Noise, Bring in the Funk, in addition to my day job at the Public. So I was traveling around the country, and I went to 25 cities 3 times to develop and galvanize the Black community to really be engaged with this production. It was an extraordinary, labor-intensive experience. And then after 9 years at the Public Theater, I decided to start my own company, Walker International Communications Group, and that was in 2002. So since that time, I've worked with the Apollo Theater and many other organizations and traveled abroad teaching, lecturing. I teach now at NYU, Columbia, and Bank Street. I've been teaching there since 1993. One of my missions in life is to raise the next generation of arts administrators who understand what equity, diversity, inclusion mean, and also who are diverse. So with my own company, I get to work with people that I like and projects that are important to me. And many of those have been on Broadway, but a lot has also been in the nonprofit sector. One of my clients is the New Jersey Performing Arts Center, and there I created the Community Engagement Department. And at that time, 5 years ago, we were the second performing arts center in the country to have a dedicated community engagement department with a vice president and dedicated budget. And since that time, we have informed the field, and there are many others that have developed. I just completed my second book, Champions for the Arts, which will be out this fall. I have a weekly blog, and I've dedicated my life now to consulting in equity, diversity, inclusion, and social justice work. So that is my focus.
You know, this is amazing, but right now the lights are out on Broadway, right?
Yes.
They're out. So I want to talk, because I want to come back to you, Donna, to talk more specifically about some of the programs that are being launched in terms of this racism. But I want to talk to you, Toby. Could you give us some insight on what the statistics look like, the data looks like, in terms of what is happening with artists and COVID?
It's not good, Toni. The Center for an Urban Future reported in October of 2020 that prior to the pandemic, New York City's creative industries employed 300,000 people, more than tech, more than education, and more than finance, and contributed more than $110 billion to our economy. Jobs in the performing arts since September 2019 have declined 72%, the sharpest loss of any industry in New York City. And New York City's small and medium-sized organizations have experienced revenue losses of 17 to 50%.
Yeah, I mean, this is sounding like it's this seems to me to be rather tragic, you know, in terms of, so Donna, talk to us about what this means in the work that you're doing, because how do you develop audiences, you know, right,
of course,
when there's
no product. Well, one of the first things that happened when the theater shut down in March, there became an awareness and a voice that I've never seen before from arts theater makers of color that really demanded that Broadway change the behavior and to disrupt systemic racism. This was put together in a document called Dear White American Theater, We See You. This is a 33-page document that has a list of demands on every aspect of how one would work on Broadway. And it's signed by thousands of industry workers. And this really launched the movement to transform Broadway. Since that time, there have been a number of other organizations that have also developed more advocacy groups that are with the same goal, but they have different focuses. So we have, you know, Black Broadway Men. We have Broadway Advocacy Coalition. We have Black Theater Coalition. We have women, Broadway for Racial Justice. That's just a few. So what I'm seeing is this huge movement from artists of color and allies who are saying the way Broadway has been produced in the past can no longer happen. And that's from every aspect, from how we decide what work to put on the stage, who produces it, how it's marketed, what is the press campaign, what is the pay equity, what unions are involved, every aspect. And so, of course, this is requiring a tremendous amount of reflection and change from Broadway producers and other leaders in that field.
So, Toby, do you think that this, talk to us about what you're seeing, you know, because again, we're looking at the fact that there is resistance. Otherwise, There is resistance. So what is it that we're looking at in terms of entrenched mindsets around on Broadway when it comes to the issues that Donna just raised?
The Asian American Performers Action Coalition found that 80% of all shows for the 2017-18 Broadway season were written by white playwrights. African American performers represented 22.7% of all hires. Latinx actors represented 3.6% of all hires, and white performers represented 66.4% of all roles, and were the only group overrepresented in their demographic footprint in New York City, where only 1/3 of the population is white. Furthermore, 6.3% of Broadway directors were Black, and there were no Latinx or Asian American directors on Broadway that season.
That's right.
One other thing, of the 8 Broadway shows written by a BIPOC playwright, all 8 shows were directed by a white director. And as Donna says, in reaction to this inequitable reality, the Broadway Advocacy Coalition, Women of Color on Broadway, Theater Producers of Color, Broadway for Racial Justice, are all saying no more. No.
Christina, I see you listening. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm taking this in. BRIC, where I have the honor of serving as the president, is not on Broadway. Our business model is free and accessible arts for all people. That being said, this is not a surprise to me. And the data is data that I've spent my career in this country seeing this data reinforced. So I think it's important that we stop. We've had this conversation, Toni, about how foundations can help, how funders can help by stop funding facade initiatives and stop funding programmatic,
Right.
front of house approaches, and make sure behind the curtain, the infrastructure and the organization itself is doing the real work. That's what we need to be doing. This facade days are over.
They are. The curtain is up and the BandAid is off.
Yes.
But, the BandAid is off, but where's the change how's this change gonna happen? Meaning, the BandAid's been off before. It was off after the civil rights movement back in the 60s, which led to affirmative action and all these other things. Now we're at a new moment.
Yes.
So how are we going to seize this and make this one authentic and real?
Well, I'll tell you some things that I'm observing that are encouraging to me. First of all, I'm seeing funding that is definitely being driven specifically for cultural organizations of color to make sure that they can build the infrastructure, be sustainable, and thrive during COVID. The Ford Foundation has completely transformed their funding models, led by Darren Walker, who has also brought in the Mellon Foundation as well as others, and making sure that America's cultural treasures get the support that they need. I think that's huge. He's a leader in the field. He manages a $13 billion portfolio. So this is definitely driving the understanding of why this needs to happen. You also have things like the Black Seed Initiative, led by the Bill and Holiday Theater.
That. Yes.
Exactly. So $5 million that's going specifically to Black theaters and Black communities that produce Black plays.
But not enough, quite honestly, right?
Oh,
when
no.
we look at it, it's like a drop in the bucket. It's a
Black seed. It's a seed.
Right.
But what happens is this starts to garner support and interest. You also have the Black Advocacy Coalition that's led by Reginald Van Lee and others, that is teaching African Americans how to be leaders in the theater industry. So they've partnered with Columbia University, and these students are learning all of the muscles and tools that they need to thrive on Broadway through the faculty at Columbia. And I think that is one of the ways to address this. It's like knowing what to do in the room. How do you produce a Broadway show? What exactly do you need? How do you put a team together? What does the general manager do? How do you manage that budget, track that budget? How do you build an advertising campaign? So they're making sure that African Americans on Broadway learn how to do this so we can sit in the room, build our own table, and drive the train. So I think that's part of those changes. This is like shifting the Titanic. It's not something that will
that's
happen
the issue. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a slow process. But if you push it, if you're driving and leading it, then I think it's two ways. African Americans and people of color have to be at the forefront and keep pushing and not relax. So that's our responsibility. Keep demanding change.
So what's the white responsibility, though, right?
Is to deliver the results, deliver what's being asked, which means.
What's their incentive, though? Oh, go ahead. Finish your thoughts. Sorry.
Right, which means that you have to look inward at why am I in this conversation to begin with? And so I consult for theaters around the country. So this is what I hear. You mean I'm a racist?
That's what
What part of that word don't you understand? Yeah, that's my response. They'll say to me, you mean I'm a racist? Yes. And you have the opportunity to transform that behavior by XYZ, by looking at how you choose your works, how you do your fundraising, who's on the stage, how do you do your marketing. So what I call it right now is in the discovery phase. That's where I see the leadership from white cultural institutions. So there is a huge
Sometimes it means that they have to step aside, though, does it not?
And they know that. But
why would they want to? I'm just kind of.
I got it. Well, so this spreads out. It's not any one monolithic path. It spreads out. So there are some white executive and artistic directors who realize that I cannot continue to do business the way I'm doing it. And either I'm mentoring a person of color or I'm bringing in someone who can replace me, and maybe I'll work side by side with them, or I'll find something else to do. So you have places like Oregon Shakespeare Festival. You have places here in New York. Several of the theaters, have now put African Americans in charge. The Lark Play Development Center, African American woman. So I'm seeing this movement now happen. And this is the first time that women, Black, are given this responsibility. So the incentive for these theaters is one, to remain relevant. Two, to be responsive to these very, very public demands. Yes. Some of them are board driven because I do a lot of board training. And some of them are also aware that we have a responsibility to our community. We're a charitable organization. Others are driven by the financial incentives. One of my clients, which is a grants-making organization, has decided, if you're not doing this work, we're not going to give you any money. And it's really that simple. And so there are a number of reasons why this reflection has to happen and will happen in different layers. But I really believe the advocacy has to continue to come from us.
Yeah, because I am so afraid that it becomes like Oscar so white, okay, we did that, it's gone, meaning it would appear that in our history, these movements have not taken root the way they need to, but this does feel like a different moment. Toby, talk to us about what you see as what white America needs to do to make this something that is sustainable and that is transformative, as Donna just said.
Well, because it's so public in terms of white America seeing that they have benefited from systemic racism for so long. And the arts world, it's now in our face that we have benefited. So society's telling us, the arts world is telling us, that we must change, and we must center racial justice at the core and the heart of everything that we do, or else we're not. It's performative. We're playing a game. It's not real. And I think it's important for arts organizations to be accountable and to post everything they're doing on their websites so that the public, if they're truly public organizations, we need to see what they're doing. And we need to be able to measure that what they're doing is supporting their BIPOC communities and not just supporting, centering their BIPOC communities in everything that they're doing. That the voices of the BIPOC communities are central to everything that they're doing. Otherwise, it's not a culturally plural organization. It remains a white-led organization.
And funders are really looking at this very deeply now. This is something they are.
So they're for real. This is authentic, you're saying.
Oh, yeah,
Very
and
authentic.
it's money. It's connected to money. And it's not just the nonprofit sector, it's corporations. So as I mentioned at New Jersey Performing Arts Center, our corporations were very clear. They wanted to make sure, are we invested in becoming, anti-racist organization? What does that look like? What are the action steps? And so right after the murder of George Floyd, I wrote a letter to the president of NJPAC, John Schreiber, and suggested that we develop social justice programming, things that would respond to the citizens of Newark and where they could take action steps to control the quality of their lives. And he said, great, what do you want to do? I said, I want to have discussions with films and then action steps. So since June, that's what we've done. Every single month, we've tackled the voter registration, the importance of voting. We've done the census. We did a panel on white fragility. We've done policing the police. We've done Black entrepreneurs. We're about to do She Did That, Black women in the workplace and the microaggressions that we deal with. We're doing one on the vaccine to educate the community on the various aspects of that. We're looking at our LGBT and trans community and the abuse and systemic racism that they are experiencing. So we are taking the issues that face our community, delivering the best people we can find to talk about it, and then create the action steps. And each of these are all filmed on our Zoom. They live on our website, and we share them very generously with the performing arts sector because we want people to continue to learn, but also how you take control of your destiny. We don't have to be victims. I refuse to be a victim.
Right. And how about how we are portrayed? Meaning we want to have control of the narratives, these stories that are told about our experience, because these have such a profound impact on how we're seen. Is that part of the strategy that you're undertaking as well?
Absolutely. The films that we choose are ones that show our narrative in an authentic way that our committee believes represents us in a very realistic and honest portrayal. We have advisors that we work with, the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, the Newark NAACP chapter. So we make sure that our lens is as accurate as can be and that it is something we are proud of. Not just doing it because we're there, but we're proud of it. We encourage everyone to see it and experience it and respond. Yeah,
so you have a playbook. You have a playbook, essentially.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And we keep building.
This
was done without any funding. This literally was a letter. I said, we've got to do it. And I created a team across departments in NJPAC, and they are just so thrilled to be working on something that means so much to them. So the work is brilliant. It's brilliant when you empower people to do what resonates in their hearts. And so my goal is to create this all over the country.
This is amazing. Everything that you said. Toby said you have to have Donna on your show. And I had no idea we were going to get a full meal like the one we just got. But in closing, Christina, is there anything that you'd like to add to what you've heard?
Yeah, as I'm sitting here and just listening to the wisdom of these ladies and obviously leading an institution, BRIC is a $17 million, 100 full-time, a staff member institution. So we're a strong mid-sized institution in New York. It's really important that as these funding streams come in, that institutions, Donna has extensive experience and is coming in an authentic, responsive, and relevant way, right? But it's important too that in this moment that we don't just easily give a pass to institutions that are just going to start being responsive now.
Right.
We can allow people to shift and own where they have not been standing up, being an ally. We can allow that transition to happen. But what we don't want to do is fund people who are just treating Black as the new Black.
That's right.
Yes. Excellent.
Or find yourself
Excellent
a
point.
ghetto organization to adopt.
Yes.
So we have to
exactly.
stay woke and
Right.
realize what's on the table.
Absolutely. And we're going to have to wrap. But the thing that I really want to make clear to us, to all of us, is the fact that this takes advocacy. It takes a change of hearts and minds. It takes the passion and the willingness to get this done. And it takes not having, don't look at it from what you're losing. Look at it from what you're gaining. Okay? Because there's so much to be gained as we come into this into pluralism. Well, Donna, you know, you've been amazing. Toby told me you would be amazing, and the information that you've provided is wonderful. Tell us what your blog is again so people can go and visit this content that you have that is for free. What's the name of your blog?
Arts and Culture Connections.
Arts and Culture
Connections. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the work you're doing. And Christina Newman Scott, thank you for the work that you are doing in Brooklyn and for your vision for that institution. And Toby, as usual, you come with the data and the authenticity
That's right.
that we need. You're the role model, Toby. You're the role model. So that's all the time we have for this episode of Brooklyn Savvy. We'll see you next time on Brooklyn Savvy.